Is there a message of necessity at the desk? There is a message of necessity at the desk. Move to accept the message of necessity. The message is accepted.
All right, welcome to Messages of Necessity. My name is Zilvinas, but friends call me Z. I'm the executive director of Empire Center, and today I'm having Ken here with me, and we're going to talk about the latest Empire Index poll, which shed some very interesting insights about what New Yorkers think and feel. How are you doing, Ken?
I am counting down the minutes until the legislature leaves town.
Oh boy, we should do another episode about that. But let's get back to what New Yorkers are thinking. Remind us all why do we do this opinion survey?
We work on public policy in New York, and in order to meaningfully educate people about public policy, the first step is to find out what people know and what they think about what they know. So that means going out there and asking people's opinion about things like government spending, government programs, the economy, and that gives us a baseline of the audience we're talking to.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, going where people are and knowing what people's problems, what people actually think, what they feel, is probably a 101 of public policy. So let's get to it. I think there is a very interesting question, a very general question that sort of caught my mind is New York going in the right direction? I think we have New York City, we have people here in Albany and upstate, and I'm sure all of them have different opinions about what New York is doing and should be doing. But what does the poll tell us? Is New York going at the right direction?
Statewide, we found 60% of New Yorkers feel the state is going in the wrong direction. That's up from 55%, which was what we measured earlier this year. It comes at a time where we have a lot of cost of living issues and crime issues downstate, and a fairly slow economic recovery happening upstate. We haven't yet drilled into exactly what's behind people's feelings about the direction of the state, but the fact of the matter is it's moving in the wrong direction.
All right, let me play devil's advocate here. Maybe it's just a Republican-Democrat split. Maybe it's people who like Joe Biden versus people who don't like Joe Biden. Do you think it's just a political sort of party split, or is there more to it?
We tend to see that more in national polling, people's attitude about the country having to do with what party is in the White House. In state government, for the bulk of the past century, we've had divided government in Albany. There hasn't really been a specific political identity on state government that would induce that kind of tribalism. There's a little bit of it, to be sure, but it doesn't inform things as much as it does on the federal level. And the fact that it's at 60% doesn't mean you have some, 1/3 of New York whose party is out of power that's aggrieved. It means 3 out of 5 New Yorkers are unhappy with the direction of the state. And that speaks to more transcendent, widespread issues.
Okay, but could it be, do we see, is it, city versus upstate? Is it young versus old? Or is it, as you're saying, the sort of a general dissatisfaction with the direction of New York?
It looks to be fairly uniform across all the categories. People are free to go on our website and look at the crosstabs. We've got a pretty robust breakdown of who said what. We sampled 1,000 New Yorkers, so obviously the smaller you go demographically, the harder it is to meaningfully measure that or to meaningfully measure any change in those groups. But we've got a 3% margin of error. So when we saw a 5-point movement from early February to the end of May, that's notable.
All right. Does any other demographic group stand out in this, in the sort of distrust of where New York is going for you?
I'm not sure.
I think I was looking through the numbers, and I think it was either this question or the question that I feel that New York government understands me. And once again, very similar. But what kind of stuck out for me is that I think there was a very large portion of government workers, or people employed by the government, who actually had a negative opinion. Now, in my mindset, I would kind of think those guys who work for the government, they kind of approve of the government's direction. But obviously, like you said, it's 1,000 people, and we need to drill deeper into this. But that actually found it interesting. I think the second interesting point that sort of stood out for me was a sex breakdown of male female. And for some reason, there are actually more females who think that the state government does not understand them. That's actually very different from men. And once again, I don't know what sparked this, but that's actually something interesting to investigate, I think, in the future.
Definitely.
All right. So these are sort of general questions. Now, one thing that is always on my mind, I don't know it's on your mind too, just because we both love energy and energy policy. But I think we have some interesting insights about the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act. You know, one the flagship, grandiose, very ambitious, or I would say overambitious climate plan for New York. I think one of the interesting things is that people don't know what it is. Is that the case with this poll as well?
Yeah, that's the surprising thing. Obviously, anytime we're talking about a sweeping public policy and the effect it's having on people, you'd assume people would know about it. Look at what happened with the Affordable Care Act. There was nearly universal awareness about the ACA when it was adopted. People also call it Obamacare. With the Climate Act that was adopted in 2019, it gave state regulators essentially superpowers over every part of the economy. And it was fairly little noticed at the time. Now, in the 5 years since, the state has started moving towards implementing it. The state is on the cusp of applying a surcharge on fossil fuels, on banning replacement oil and gas furnaces, on banning replacement oil and gas appliances. And it's just remarkable that we still see that most of the state is unaware about any meaningful level about the Climate Act or what it's doing.
Why do you think this is? Is it because now it could be that it's very long and complicated and deals with British thermal units and CO2 emissions? So do you think it's the complexity of it, or do you think that just the government didn't promote it enough, or do you think there's something more sinister here?
People aren't aware of it because it hasn't made landfall yet. It's a Category 5 storm headed for the state economy, but all people are seeing right now is maybe some like bigger waves at the beach and some darkening skies. We haven't yet had these big regulations, these big costs hit. People are feeling it a little bit. Your electric bills are higher because of CLCPA. There's a lot of uncertainty in the energy sector right now, which is indirectly affecting customers and their costs because of CLCPA. But people haven't been unable to buy something, or people haven't seen costs jump overnight the way they did with the Affordable Care Act, where 1 minute people had an insurance product and the next minute they didn't, or 1 minute people could see a doctor and the next minute they couldn't. So as that stuff starts to happen, I think we're going to see recognition of the law really spike. And part of why we're pulling it now is to get a baseline to find out just how many people are not yet aware of this, and how is that going to change as some of the most economically destructive parts come into force.
Right, and this economic destruction is Category 5 that you're talking. That's going to be higher taxes, higher bills, higher payments for energy. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, all of the above. One of my big concerns is that energy intensive businesses are already questioning whether or not they're going to expand in New York, not because they've been given a tax bill yet evenly, but because there's so much uncertainty in New York compared to all the other places in the country they could locate or elsewhere in the world, that they're having major trepidations about continuing to invest and putting sinking any more costs into a physical footprint in New York. And that's going to affect everything from local employment to local tax bases.
All right, and I think we had an excellent follow-up question when we asked the respondents of how much they're willing to pay for cleaner energy. What does that show us?
We've been asking the question, how much are you willing to pay for cleaner energy? And we saw back in February that that 60% of people were willing to pay no more than $20 per month additional for cleaner energy. That's totaling everyone who said nothing, which is over 30%. Anybody who said less than $10, anybody who said $10 to $20. we find essentially that the bulk of New Yorkers are unwilling to pay more than an additional $240 per year, which is obviously extremely small in the grand scheme of things when we look at the fact that the state wants to spend hundreds of billions of dollars overhauling the economy, with a big chunk of that directly affecting monthly energy costs. We asked again, so we were at 60% back in January and February. In our latest poll, we saw that number was at 62%. And that's, if I could speculate, I'd say people are still feeling the heat from inflation. And so they are not really happy campers when you talk to them about other ways and places where their costs might go up, even if it's something that they want in terms of a policy goal. We often see questions about, do you want a cleaner environment? Do you want more regulations for environmental purposes? We see that stuff poll extremely well. What pollsters don't do a great job at is asking people about the trade-offs. And that's part of what we're trying to touch on here. We're trying to put those trade-offs into a sentence. You have policy goal, you have dollars. How do you feel? How many dollars are you willing to give for that policy goal? And we see that it's basically a small fraction of what the state is going to end up charging people.
So 60%, give or take, 60% of people want to basically pay $10 or less for cleaner energy. Is that right?
Less than $20. So maybe there are the real green-hearted people are willing to go to 19.
All right. Okay, well, let me once again play the devil's advocate. Is that a fair question? What if we ask people, how much are you willing to pay for roads? How much are you willing to pay for the police? And couldn't someone say, no, that's an unfair question. People want things, but they don't want to pay for them because people are generally internally inconsistent.
It's always hard in surveys to measure what people really care most about, and what they say is their top priority versus what will actually be their priority when they go and when they go vote, or when they go and even just publicly express a policy preference. It's hard. I think this got us into the neighborhood. I mean, we aim to avoid any kind of tendentious language in this polling. We're trying to do the Joe Friday approach, just the facts, and see where people are. So I think this gives us a pretty good indicator of the sensitivity people have, because I would posit if we were going to poll a community that was really gung-ho about this stuff, you'd see people saying, I'm willing to spend $500 more a month, or there is no limit on how much I'm willing to spend. And we asked those questions. We gave people the option to go up to the high end of stuff. And we saw a very small portion of people willing to go up as high as the state is possibly going to be asking them to go, as some of these more costly things come online. We've got these really significant subsidies for offshore wind, subsidies for building transmission lines to New York City, and also huge subsidies coming for battery storage to back up the state's wind and solar assets. And these are going to be funded by ratepayers, and they're going to be distributed evenly geographically across the state. So even while New York City and Long Island might be getting some of the air quality benefits of phasing out their older power plants, you're going to have people in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and Plattsburgh paying significantly more for electricity just to subsidize those downstaters.
Yeah, I remember looking at the demographics of this question. And once again, I was expecting to find, who are these people who are willing to pay $200 or more. That is a small percentage, and I couldn't find any meaningful trend. Yes, sure, richer people on average would like to pay more, probably because they can afford more. Yes, education plays a part, but I think the reason why I actually like this question, the reason why I like the answers, it actually shows that across the broad demographic, people don't want to spend exorbitant amounts of money on the climate goals. And once again, nothing wrong with climate goals, but I think we kind of concur, and what this shows is that the state government is overreaching or being over-ambitious or unrealistically ambitious in what it's going to do and how much it is going to cost. Okay, continuing about spending too much, I think New York school districts actually lead the country by spending. What does our poll show about it?
We wanted to see what folks think about their local government or their local school district spending, rather. We had asked people back in February what they thought New York spends per pupil. The median response we got was $8,000 per student per year. The answer was close to $29,000 per student per year. So it helped us identify a major awareness gap between New Yorkers and what they think their schools are spending. We wanted to see how that worked out on a local level. So we asked people how they felt their school district's spending compared to national norms. And what was really surprising was we had 33% of people say they think their school district spending is about the same as the national average. Well, the really funny part about that is every school district in New York spends considerably more than the national average. The national level in per pupil spending is around $15,000. I don't think we have any school districts that spend less than $19,000 per year. Most New York school districts are in the top quintile, that is to say the top 20% of spenders nationwide. Even more shockingly, 14% of people believed their school district is spending less or significantly less than the national average. So altogether, that tells you 47% of people have a really big misconception about how New York's school spending compares nationally. And that shouldn't be such a shocker because we've been in this mode in New York where money is being directed into the school system instead of accountability. We've just continually been putting more and more funds into stuff. So people feel they're getting, basically, the normal, a normal level of education for their kids by national standards, even though we've been pumping a lot more money than we need to be, frankly, into that system.
Right. The outcomes definitely seem mediocre, while the spending seems excessive. Okay,
they are behind Kansas, Kentucky, and Texas.
In outcomes, not in spending.
That is not Ken and Z's feelings. That is on the nation's report card. The combined scores for New York were behind Kentucky, Texas, and Kansas in the 2022 National Assessment of Educational Progress.
Okay, but why do you think there is such a knowledge gap? Because I can understand that climate change, leadership, community act, all of that seems complicated and very removed from people. School spending, most people have kids and their kids go to school and people vote on budgets. Why is there such a big misconception? Why do New Yorkers think that actually not overspending? Why do New Yorkers think that they're spending on average? Is it the messaging from schools? Is it some sort of passive PR campaign?
Often in public policy, I first think back to the fact that normal people are living their lives. The well-adjusted adults out there aren't looking at the same spreadsheets you and I are. So they don't know what the national norms are. And we talk about, at the Empire Center, we talk about the cost of schools, not only because it's an important part of government spending and it's an opportunity for us to lower the cost of government and lower taxes in New York, but also because there's been this huge missed opportunity to improve student outcomes. Every year that the legislature has put $1 billion of school aid instead of 1,000 hours of attention and reform into the education system, kids are worse off.
All right. And the final thing I want to touch upon, which is kind of connected to school spending, it's the property tax cap. It sounds arcane, but most well-adjusted adults, they experience that in one way or another. So Ken, explain to us what the property tax cap is, why it is important, and how New Yorkers feel about it.
New York, since 2011, has had a property tax cap, at least on the 57 counties outside New York City, that limits the rate at which property taxes can rise to 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower, with some exceptions. This is a limit on the total amount of property tax that a local government or a school district can collect without getting a supermajority to approve going over. So In school districts, which collect the bulk of property taxes, it means you'd need 60% of voters to approve a budget instead of just a simple majority. That is to say, if you are going to override the cap.
Right. So it's basically the tax growth is limited. The taxes don't grow as fast as they could, right?
The property tax cap makes sure that the price of government doesn't go up faster than the price of everything else, like to put it in a nutshell there. And it's kind of, it's a super technical thing, but it's also something that is constantly under attack from the teachers unions in New York, which view the tax cap as disrupting their ability to get sweeter contracts and more goodies from the taxpayers every time they sit down at the negotiating table. So they have been trying for the past 13 years to blow up the tax cap, either by getting their sympathetic lawmakers to create exceptions or loopholes in the tax cap, or by going to court and trying to litigate to get a judge to strike it down. But the property tax cap has saved New Yorkers tens of billions of dollars by slowing the growth of property taxes down around the rate of inflation. And we wanted to see how people felt about the cap. So when we explained the cap to folks, we found huge support for keeping the property tax cap, with 67% of voters strongly or somewhat supportive of the cap, compared to just 12% who were strongly or somewhat opposed to it.
All right, that's encouraging. That seems like something. If I were running for office, or if I was listening to what people are saying, or if my job depended on what people are thinking about policies, I would keep that in mind.
And it still told us we have work to do, because there's that remaining fraction of voters who aren't aware of what the property tax cap is or what it's doing. So we're going to keep working on it at the Empire Center, and making sure that people know just how effective this policy is and what kind of good stuff it's done for New York.
Indeed, it has. Obviously, New York is not the only state that has it, but I think the general principle of imposing some sort of safeguard, some sort of guardrail, some sort of a speed limit on how fast the government can grow is something that two reasonable, well-adjusted adults can agree on. All right, this has been Ken and Z. I hope you enjoyed our show. If you want to dwell deeper into what we just discussed, go to empirecenter.org, and up there you should see the opinion poll. And if you wanna really look into what demographic thought what about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, it's in there as well. Once again, empirecenter.org. Go there. It's free of charge. It's free to all of our users. I hope you enjoyed this dialogue, and we shall see you next on Messages of Necessity.
For more news and analysis, visit our website and sign up for email updates at empirecenter.org. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Empire Center.